Hello and welcome to this lesson where we're going to go over basic type tools and settings here in Adobe Illustrator. So the first thing we're going to do is going to go to File, New, and I'm just going to name it Type. And I'm going to specify 860 by 600 points here, and that just happens to work well with my resolution. It fills it out at 100% basically, so you can set yours whatever you wish over there. The bleeds, we want 0 because we're not having anything for print here. And then in the Advanced tab, make sure you have your color mode at RGB, raster effects 72, and then just hit OK. All right, so I'm going to hit Control-1 just to get to 100%, or Command-1 on Mac. And basically, just so we're looking at the same exact layout, we're going to come up here to Essentials, or it may be something else depending on if you ever specified a different layout, and just click on Essentials and then hit Reset Essentials. And that's going to allow us to be looking at the same thing. So I'm going to expand this again right here just by clicking that. And the way we'll just get started here by just focusing on the very basic type tool. So if it's selected something else for you, just left click and drag, and that's how you can access these other areas. So the way you get type onto a canvas, very simple. There's two different ways. You can just left click and type, or you can left click and specify an area or a container, a type container. And so this could be good if you're if you're designing like a restaurant menu, for example, where there's a lot of text. And this will allow it so that if you're typing a lot of text or a lot of like paragraphs or whatever, it will automatically, instead of you hitting enter to create a new line, it will create a new line once you get over here. All right, so I'm just going to delete this. And I'm going to scale this up. So the way you scale up text, two different ways. You can come up here to the text or the type toolbar, and you have your different settings up here, of course. You have your fonts, and you have the font style, and then the size. So you can just click on this to increase the size, or click on this to specify one of the presets sizes that are selected here. Or you can just hold Shift and left click and drag to change the size of your type. Very simple. Just a note though, if you're using, if you specify text like here, I'll just type in type, and you try to change the size of the type container, holding Shift, you'll see that the type does not change font size. So the only way to change the font size when you specify text that way is through up here. All right, so let me delete that. All right, so basically looking up here, this lists out all your fonts. So you can just click down here, or you can just type in and it'll automatically give you a list based on which letters you're typing in. And I also find it helpful that when I'm trying to figure out a font that I want to use for any given project, to just left click once so it highlights up here, and then use my keyboard's down or up arrow to cycle through fonts until I get to something that I like. All right, so I'm going to go back just to the default Myriad Pro. And over here, the font styles. Some fonts have no styles, except for their default regular style. And then some have a lot, like this one, for instance. So that's the type toolbar. Another way you can access more specific type functions and features are through if you go to Window, Type, Character. So that brings up the character window, which is right here. And these options right here, the font family, the font style, and size, are reflected right here, the font family, style, and size. Now we have a couple other options here though that are not present up here, and these are all very important. So you have right here the leading. So the leading is a space between lines of text. So when you just have a single word like this, you don't really need to worry about it. But just to show you how that works, I'm going to edit this just by double clicking it. I'm going to type in a line of text, or multiple lines rather. So if we select back on the Move tool, we can adjust this leading here, or the line height. You can use these arrows down here. So this will bring everything in closer, or we could specify auto based on the font, and use the presets right here. Very simple. So beneath this, we have the tracking or the letter spacing or the width between the actual characters. So we can use these down arrows to adjust that, to bring them in closer, or we can specify some of the options. So you have negatives and positives over here. So the way you use this is completely dependent on the project and what you're going after. So there's no right or wrong necessarily. So I'm going to hit 0. And then we have right here what's called kerning. So kerning is the space between pairs of letters. Some fonts you'll notice if you type a word, one of the letters might just look physically out of space in relation to the other characters. So the adjustment of that space is referred to as kerning. And so if we look over here, we'll see we have auto, and that's what it's automatically set on by default. And it's basically, it uses the built-in kerning table of a font, and it assigns values that designate the space between common letter pairs like WE, WA, LA, YA, YO, and many others. Optical kerning is slightly different in that it determines the space between characters based on their actual shape. So if you're working with a font that has bad auto kerning right here, or sometimes it's referred to as metric, you may want to use optical in order to fix that. And so I'll just show you an example. You can see it's slightly changed when we went from auto and optical. So to show you an example of what I'm talking about to better illustrate kerning, I'm just going to type in the word type right here, and I'm going to make this one auto, and I'm going to scale it up a lot. And I'm going to duplicate it, Control C, Control F, and I'm going to change this one to optical. So you can see that it's slightly changed, and to show you that, I'm going to hit Control R just to get out the rulers and left click and drag on a guide right between, or the end of Y. We can see that they're even, and then drag out another one right where this one begins at the top. Now you'll see the difference here. Optical changed that kerning so that the P is closer to the Y. If you look at both of these examples, and let me turn off the rulers real quick and hide the guides, you'll see that based on the kerning of all these letters here, this one's actually more accurate than this one, because the space between the T and the Y, for instance, up here is a lot less so than this right here. So in this case, optical wins. So it all depends on what you want to use for your project. So that's kerning basically. Now you can also access other options if you come up here and you choose show options. And so these options you generally don't use as much. For instance, let me delete this real quick. So this right here will change the vertical height of the font, and it will literally change the appearance of the font. Let me go back to 100%. Generally, I've never really used that. You can do the same thing with the width. You can bring them in or make it real wide. Very simple. And then down here we have a tool which is called character rotation, and if you do that, you can see how based on the degree that's specified, and there's also settings down here, it will literally change the orientation or the rotation of each individual letter. So again, there's not going to be many uses for this, but you do have the options here. So I'm going to go back to 0. And then down here, this is based on, it's called the baseline shift, and that's the height of a baseline upon which text sits. So if you have multiple lines of text, you'll be able to see a difference, but generally it's not something that you use often. And then down here, we'll have just several real quick options for transforming text. So if you want it to be all caps, you could just click on that really quickly instead of having to manually change the letters. And then small caps, that will make it, basically it's like all caps except for it'll change it down to a smaller size. Over here we have superscript, and you'll notice that more so, say for example, if we had 2ND for example, let me turn that off, and I just take the ND, that will change it like that. Very simple. Same thing with that superscript, and then subscript down here, we'll change it down there. And then we have underline, very simple, and then strike through. So again, very simply, you also have anti-aliasing options down here. You could have none. You can see how it makes it changes that, make it look really pixelated in a sense, and then sharp and crisp, and it just changes the font rendering basically. So I always just most of the time I just leave mine at sharp. So then over here we have the paragraph, and I'm going to really quickly, I'm just going to delete this, left click and drag out an area. I'm going, well, real quickly, let me change that font size because that's really large. I'm going to try 40. To type a few lines of text. All right. So now to illustrate this, this is left justification or a line left. It's basically what's default. You can center, very simple, obviously, and then write a line. We can also change the justification, justify the last line aligned left. You can justify the last line aligned center, justify the last line aligned right, and then also justify all lines of text. And this is something that you see in newspapers, for example, in newspaper articles when there's a lot of text that they have to fit within a specific column, and they'll make it all evenly spaced out. So that can be handy as well. And down here, when it comes to these options, these apply when you have, again, paragraphs of text. You have indentations, left indent, right indent, first line, left indent, etc. So that is it when it comes to the basic type tools. And you're going to find through the vast majority of your projects, your design projects, that everything that we just covered here, this is mainly what you're going to be using. So that's it for basic type tools. In the next lesson, we're going to go a little bit more in depth in terms of manipulating text and working with type by working with paths in type. So I'll see you then.